I'm here with Gob. Thanks for sitting down with me.
No problem. Glad to be here.
And the question is, how do you learn a language?
I like to think that it's not that hard. That I have three main steps. Um, so I'll try to go through each step, and then yeah. Basically, the first step is translation. I use something called a translation method. I use an Assimil book. I usually have my books, don't have them now. But so Assimil, it's a company. Basically, they teach this method called like the Assimil method because it's like you assimilate the language. So they give you a text on the right side, which is the language, your native language. The left side is your new language, right? The target language. And so basically, it doesn't really focus on grammar. It doesn't really focus on like, when you first learn language, you might do colors, animals, numbers. It doesn't really care about that. It's basically trying to get you to think in the language as soon as possible. So I think that's pretty important. So you're seeing the translation, but it's giving you the literal translation. It's giving you the meaning and then also translating word for word what that means. So in languages like French and Spanish, it would be quite easy, right? Because they're similar. But if you're doing like, for example, maybe Thai, if you're doing from French to Thai, then it's going to be a little harder, but you're training your brain right from the start to think in Thai. And then it's giving you the word for word translation at the bottom. So basically, you are forced to make the effort to see how the grammar of Thai is working in this method. And so I would start. So I would translate. For example, I would look at the French and translate it to Thai, and then I would do that. It has 100 lessons. So those lessons, I usually spend, let's say, 5 hours per one lesson. Okay, and in those lessons, I break it down. The first one is I translate. The second one is I transcribe. So it means I listen to that lesson and write it down. And then the third one is, the third thing I do is I listen to it and then I repeat it. And then I will do that takes me about, I guess, like I said, 5 hours. But the last thing, which is very important, is to retain that vocabulary. So I would say it kind of goes into the second stage, not the second stage, but the second aspect of language learning, which is Anki, I use Anki, which is just space repetition software. So I really think you need space repetition. Some people don't like it because it's kind of monotonous. But for me, I like it because I'm always using the Assimil method. So everything I have from Assimil, like those new words. So for example, if I'm on lesson 15, I'll probably get 4 or 5 new words in lesson 15 of Assimil. And then that sentence where I get the new word, I basically input that one sentence into my Anki, the space repetition software. And I also get the audio from the book and I insert that into Anki too. So Anki is basically a software where it's like a flashcard, right? Essentially, but it's on in the software. And so
It's a spaced repetition.
yeah, software. So it's like, okay, I always go from for example, I don't use English, but I would always, for example, let's just say English to Thai. So you never want to do Thai to English if you're learning Thai. It's always English to Thai. And then
So on the flashcard, you see the English, and you have to guess or know the Thai.
the Thai word.
Okay.
But then context is very important. So every Thai word that I have is from Assimil, a lesson where I've already studied for 5 hours. So it's pretty easy for me to let's say 4 or 5 hours. It's pretty easy for me to remember that word from the context because I had basically spent so much time, usually 2 or 3 days on one lesson, 2 days probably. And so that space repetition software, which is the second aspect of language learning, is really important because it's helping me maintain everything I learned. If Assimil is 100 lessons, it does a great job of building the lessons. So it incorporates grammar that you've learned previously and the vocabulary you've learned previously. But it can't always, you can't use, the lessons are quite short. So it's not like you can use the vocabulary continuously. But it does build the grammar. It does a great job of something called this Krashin's theory of comprehensible input, which is I plus 1. I is the input, so it basically adds 1. It makes it a little bit harder each time. Each lesson is a little bit harder, a little bit more difficult than what you just learned. So it's a really, that's why I really appreciate Assimil. But you can't remember that. You're not going to retain it without the space repetition software or if you're living in that place.
So each lesson of this, you said spend 5 hours on it. Is it like a paragraph length, or does it start with sentence length and build to paragraph length, or what?
It's a conversation essentially.
It's a conversation. Okay.
Yeah. I wish I had my book, but it's like I would say 50 words. So it's not. That's why I wouldn't say it's a graded reader. Graded reader, you would need some reading fluency before you can use that.
Okay.
I think if you got the lesson 60 of Assimil, then you can use a graded reader, depending on the language. Yeah.
Okay.
But that would be my.
And is it good at recycling the vocabularies from previous lessons into next lessons? Does it intentionally try to do that?
It depends on the language, but yeah, it's very intentional with the grammar. But
okay.
It's because it's very succinct, those lessons. So it's not. It can't incorporate all the grammar. All the vocabulary at each lesson, but it does try to.
And you mentioned it was German, two of the foreign language you want to learn, or it's English. And like if you're trying to learn Thai, is the translation in English?
Well, I most polyglots will use a different language. So I use French. When Thai, I had to use French because Assimil only has French to Thai.
Okay.
But in other languages, for example, Vietnamese, I use German, so German to Vietnamese.
Do they have? So there's no. If I'm a monolingual English speaker and I want to learn Thai, I can't use this.
Unfortunately, they don't have it.
English to Thai.
Yeah, but
okay.
I was actually thinking of maybe telling them, be like, "Hey, I'll write."
Making it for them.
Yeah.
If you're out there, Assimil,
I'll do it.
That's your man.
Yeah, I know Thai and I know English.
Mm-hmm.
But not the problem with it, but the thing about the Assimil method, it needs dedication from the user. So if you're not doing a minimum of 30 minutes a day, I think 30 minutes is enough. But you really need to do 30 minutes plus a little bit of the spaced repetition software. It's not gonna be effective. Is basically what it is. So because you assimilate it when you get enough input. If you're not getting sufficient input, your mind is not gonna be able to understand how the language works, right? So for me, you would need at least 30 minutes, 6 days a week. Like if you don't have that, then I would say it's not really going to be effective.
Okay.
And it's more for independent.
So it's like 3 hours a week.
Yeah.
Total.
And then probably I would say 10 or 15 minutes of spaced repetition.
Okay.
To go with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you said there was 3 steps. So what's the third step after Anki?
So one step along with the goes with the spaced repetition is passive listening. So I also listen to, for example, now I learned Swahili, so I'm up to level 20. So every day I listen to lessons 1 to 10 on repeat, just passively. So if maybe I was driving my motorbike or in the gym, I'll listen to lessons 1 through 10 passively, and then repeat what they said. And that's just to get to get that input, to get used to the sounds of the language. But you don't really have to do that if you're using the language on a daily basis. Like I don't listen to Thai or like Chinese passively anymore because I'm higher level in those languages. But yeah, if you're trying to build your listening fluency, you definitely, that's one aspect that you can.
And you listen only in the target language, not in translation, not the translation.
Oh
as well?
Yeah. I never listen to any translation, no, because like I said, if I spend 4 to 5 hours on that language, that lesson, when I hear it, if I should pretty much be able to understand everything, and then I usually repeat after it. Like even if I'm working out, I'll be murmuring to myself, so it might look kind of weird, but I usually
Swahili in the gym in Chiang Mai.
Pretty much.
Yeah, it's a little weird.
Yeah. You go wapi. Yeah. I would do that. So that's part of the passive. That's part of the step 2 where it's kind of the repetition.
Okay.
I would say, but it's kind of repeating what you. It's more passive. You can do that any time, but I would point out as the second aspect of language learning. The third aspect is the actual speaking, which is the most important. And unfortunately, I think many people stumble on this part. If you get to ideally, I will get to lesson 60 of Assimil, depending on my situation. Like now, I'm in level 20 of Assimil for Swahili, but I'm going to start online classes 1-on-1. I usually wouldn't do that ideally, but I'm going to Kenya soon, so I'm kind of having to push it. So I would say the optimal is get to lesson 60 of Assimil, so you have enough vocabulary, you have a good grasp of the grammar if you're doing consistently, and then if you get to level 60 of Assimil, you start with intensive language lessons. And what I mean by this is for 1 month, I would say at least 3 to 4 times a week, an hour of class one-on-one. And this class doesn't have to be with a teacher necessarily, it just needs to be a native speaker, but it needs to be intensive, like I said, 3 to 4 hours a week, and zero English. By this time, you don't need any English. If you've gotten to level 60, you don't need English. So I tell people is like going to the gym. Like, if you're trying to lose 30 pounds, you can't do it in a month. Like, you just can't. If you're trying to put 20 pounds of muscle, you can't do it in 2 months. Like, that's the same thing in language. Your brain is a muscle. Your ears need to be trained. Even people who have photographic memories, they can read a dictionary, maybe memorize it, but that doesn't mean they can speak it, the language, right? Because your ears still need to be able to decipher what people are saying to you.
Like spark meaning from what you hear. You
can't have a one-sided conversation. So like even people, so I think language is pretty. The thing is, it's very, for me, it's a very. I'm going off topic, but it's kind of, how would I say, it's kind of ironic because people see it as they'll see me and be like, oh wow, you're so intelligent, but I'm literally just doing what we all have this equipment. We're all equipped with the ability to acquire knowledge, and the mere fact that we speak our first language is an indicator of that.
Yeah. And
so I always tell people, no, I just have been able to like be consistent and then see, like it takes other things, but like I've been able to be consistent and see what works for me, and then use the system that I already have in my mind that we all have that are equipped with to kind of attack the language and you can say attack and then basically acquire it. So so even memorizing a textbook, memorizing the grammar won't help you. Right? You can't speak it because that's not a language. Language is a living, right? So you need to be able to use it to communicate with it, to use language to communicate. So listening is important. You need to train your ears, train your mind to think. Obviously, the grammar is important, but you can get that naturally if you get with enough input. So there's people have different ideas of how to learn languages. Of course, this way that I just said. I think you could probably maybe do it a faster way, but for me, I really want to have a grasp of the grammar and like a good grasp of vocabulary too. So I might take a little bit. Actually, it's not that long. It's 180 hours. It doesn't seem that long, but
that's a lot. 180 hours is a lot.
Is a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot of time to devote to something.
Okay. Yeah. But it's more about consistency because if you're doing it consistently, it's. For me, it's inevitable. But
so when you mentioned understanding the grammar, but none of these methods you're talking about teach grammar explicitly. So how do you learn the grammar?
So the grammar is in the Assimil. It's basically, like I said, they're giving it to you in small doses. And what I will say, it depends on the language. So I've studied a lot of Asian languages where there are not really cases. Like grammatical cases, which we were just talking about, for example, Hungarian. So you can, for things like cases, you can drill them. Assimil will introduce the cases naturally, but it might be harder to, I want to say get used to, get your ear used to, because it's just not enough input.
Yeah.
But so you can, for example, I speak German as cases. In Croatian, I used to speak, but it has 7 cases. So for Croatian, I'm not so comfortable in cases. So if I want to get back into it, I'll probably drill the cases with the teacher, and just do it like, make sentences. They would ask me questions, and I would just drill until I hear them use it enough. And then
so there's some like morphology things that may be best drilled.
Yeah, but Assimil can still give you a feel for that of what it is, and then after you get a feel. we don't have a word for that. Sprachgefühl in German. But yeah, you get that feeling, but it just means language feeling. Feel for the language. There we go. So that's what Assimil will give you, and then afterwards you can drill it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But for Asian languages, which I've studied, I spent a lot of time studying. Like, there's no cases, so the grammar is not as important as getting the input, listening. Yeah, because most Westerners have trouble with the tones, and maybe like in Vietnamese, the vowels are crazy, right? Khmer, it's crazy vowels. Thai is long, short. So then I would say for that, then listening is more important, and also the third aspect, which is the speaking. So I didn't finish about the speaking. We can go back to that, but that's the most important because
when you start meeting with the tutor after about finishing level 60 of Assimil.
Yeah, so 180, 200 hours. That is so vital to do it consistently because you want your brain to start thinking it and thinking in the language, and you want zero English because when you use English, I tell people it's like imagine going to the gym and you're lifting up, the weight, and then whenever it's hard, the teacher comes and lifts up the weight for you. So at the moment that you're able to grow, that's the hardest moment. I mean, your mind is a muscle. So the moment on that set when you lift the weight, actually that's the hardest set. When you're lifting, the hardest repetition is when you're tearing your muscle. And then when you tear the muscle, it comes back to become stronger. So it's the same for your brain. When you are using English, you're like pushing it, you're like, I can do it. And then you use English, and that's like, someone's helping you with the weight. Mm-hmm. So you basically
just finish your set for you.
Yeah, you basically just robbed yourself of the chance.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think so many people, I don't want to say fail, but they take so long. Because they're not doing that. You need that, I would say 30 to 40 hours. No language that I speak, have I not done that? I mean, that's essential. You can't speak if you don't do this phase of language learning.
It's kind of like a stepping phase between going out in the public, meeting people.
Exactly.
It's this sitting down deliberately with a very patient person.
Yeah, very patient person, Zero English. It's like your training wheels.
Mm-hmm.
And
training wheels.
So people are like trying to drive a car and they didn't even have training wheels before. So that's like, I don't know, like you can imagine in Thailand, people are trying to go and like, Sawadee krap, and they're like, oh, วันนี้ไปไหนมาครับเป็นยังไงบ้างกินข้าวหรือยังครับ and they're like, oh, they were not ready for all that. They're just ready for Sawadee krap. So it's like, yeah, I would say you need to have that training with the 40 hours of intense language.
And then after that, what do you do, or what can you do?
So let me just say, in those hours, certainly, they're like, how can you prevent the teacher from using English? So what I do is, I have pictures. So I have like 15 different scenarios, pictures. It's like a clip art, basic. You can get any picture with AI. You can get any picture nowadays. Just a small, like a clip art. Like my first picture is of kids playing in a park. So we have nature, we have the sun, they're in a park, they're doing many, like 10 different activities. In this picture, when my last language I tried to speak was Khmer, I used this picture for 8 hours. One picture I used for 8 hours. Like I basically milked this picture for all the vocabulary it had. And then after 10 hours, my teacher was like, wow, you're speaking Khmer. And I was like, yeah, I just used this one picture, but I was able to become fluent within the realm of this picture. Anything that this picture had to offer, I could say fluently. And I can hear fluently. So the pictures are very important because they are basically limiting the vocabulary that the teacher can use with you. Mm-hmm. And so the teacher doesn't know your exact level, if you got to level 60 of Assimil. But by saying, hey, teacher, this is tutor, teacher, whatever, or native speaker, ask me anything in this picture, that's it. Some people are better at it than others. Some people might like go off on a tangent. And so I remember one like in Khmer, they tried to use like the word like, I don't know, like they used some abstract word like related to weather, and I didn't get it. It was like, ask something abstract. So that's not good because it's not in the picture. You don't want abstract words at the beginning. You want basically to train your mind to if you don't understand a word or two, but you have this situation, this picture, your mind is really good making the connection if you give it the chance to to work. Your mind needs a chance to interpret the context, just like when you're a kid. Did I tell you that example earlier?
Which one?
I think it was about buoyancy. Buoyancy, yeah.
Yeah.
That was last night. I was like,
what happened?
Yeah, I just knew my mind was able to.
So last night you were in Shanghai.
Yeah, Shanghai went overnight. I was talking to my friend, overnight flight from Shanghai, just in Shanghai for 4 hours. I mean, I haven't really spoke Chinese that much. It's one of my better languages, but yeah. So she used the word fu li, which is buoyancy, and li is pretty common character. Fu is not as common, but we were talking about diving, deep sea diving. And so she said this water has more buoyancy. In Maldives, it has more buoyancy than the other water. So in that situation, because I trained my mind to be able to decipher like a word within the context, I trained it. It's not like I was just born with that. I mean, we were born to be able to train our minds. So it's not like if I hadn't trained it, I wouldn't have been able to get the word so fast. I don't think I heard that word before, but because I was able to really quickly get say fu, okay, fu is floating, and then I know li is power, so floating power. That can only be buoyancy, right? And if we're talking about diving in water. So you're basically, that's a very advanced word, right? Buoyancy. So I got that from being able to train through like situations of small, like beginning picture, like clip art picture of kids playing in a park. I trained my mind to be able to do that from a very basic level. So you need, that's what the training is for. It's your training wheels, right? You need those 40 hours where you're looking at these pictures. Eventually, you don't need the pictures. Eventually, then you're just speaking naturally to the person. But I really think people neglect that. They don't. I mean, usually, how do we learn? We learn in the classroom. I'm sorry, but that's not the best way to learn to speak. If you want to lecture and you want to hear, I will only go to classroom if I'm already at an advanced level and I'm just trying to get input. And I think I can speak okay. Like when I went to Thai, I did Thai school. I was already I was in the advanced class. I wasn't advanced. I was the worst student in the class. Mm-hmm. But I went because I needed the listening input. But I still had already done my 40 hours of speaking, like one-on-one. So, yeah. The class is not going to help you speak. It's more for input. So if you want to speak, we're going to really need that tutor for the 30 or 40 hours. Doesn't matter what language. Maybe some language, Spanish. If your first language is English to Spanish, then maybe 25, 30 hours. If it's like Thai, 40 to 50. But always when you're doing those classes, so for example, in the picture, I also put those words, any new words, I'll put that in my Anki too. So now on my Anki, I have only Assimil words, and then words from my classes from those 40.
Now with the Assimil, with the Anki and the Assimil, you're using the context of the Assimil sentence.
Yes.
Do you add, when you take a word from your class and put it into your Anki deck, do you add any context sentence there too?
Yes. I use the exact sentence I either use the exact sentence from that lesson, from what he or she said, the teacher, or I'll do like 3 words at once. So for example, so when in my park picture, I learned the word, the dog, there's a dog sitting waiting for the bone from the owner, right? So I might say, the hungry dog sits on the mat waiting for the bone. So then I would bone, mat, and then I guess I could have added owner in there. So I would deliberately add those words that I just encountered in that lesson. So I'd be like, who is this? So the first day, we might say, oh, this is a boy. Then the third day, we might say, this is the owner of the dog. So you see how you can kind of get, you can kind of get more, you can progress there. And so, yeah, at that point, I make the words from I make the sentences. Because I try to usually just get 3 words in a sentence, but they're all from that picture. Then I asked my teacher to record my sentences, and then I put that recording in Anki also. So context is very important. Never, ever memorize 1 word for 1 word. Unless you're like for a test, and then it doesn't really matter because it's not speaking. If I see people when they're trying to learn Thai and they're doing memorize 1 word for 1 word, I'm just like, this is never gonna work. You can never. Thai and English are so different.
Yeah, you don't know how to. You're gonna memorize like
Yeah.
Lao.
Lao, yeah.
Yeah, try to use
Yeah.
that, yeah.
I mean, you maybe if it's a noun.
Right.
Some nouns,
really
but-
solid noun, like food nouns or
Yeah.
fruit names.
Yeah.
Might be helpful.
But like even then, it's like for me, it's still a waste of time. It's better to do a sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Like say, he buys the ripe market. He buys the ripe mangosteen at the market.
Yeah.
That's a lot better than learning the word mangosteen.
Yeah.
Or just making the sentence, but it should be like a sentence that you know. Like for me, Anki, a lot of people like to get their pre-made decks. I never do that. Do it from the context that you've experienced in your real life, in your actual life, or like in the picture that I said. And during those 40 hours, I'm very silly because we think about when you learn as a kid. You're not afraid to make mistakes. Your language is really related to emotions. So if you're nervous, if it's fun or you're scared, embarrassed, angry, you're going to remember those things. So obviously, if you're doing class with a stranger, you don't want to be like angry or, it's just you don't want to be negative emotions. So it should be funny. That's better. If it's neutral, you're not going to remember. So I usually say really stupid things, try to make my teacher laugh, and then just sound stupid. And then that sticks better. It makes the lesson more fun. It entertains my teacher too, because they have to see this shit for 8 hours, the same picture, right? I'm talking about the picture. So it makes it just more fun and then more memorable, right? Like I've just made some silly sentences over my times of this one picture. I've used this picture in the park for 10 languages. And in every language, it's like I use different sentences because it's just, so be funny, be creative, and just be silly. Language has to be flexible, right? So you have to be able to adapt to any situation. So if you're just saying just really predictable things, I don't think that's training your brain. But so that's another thing, like being and then also obviously letting go of your ego, because that's another big reason. Obviously, if you don't have these 40 hours and you're trying to speak outside, that doesn't have to do with ego. You can't do it. You didn't have the training. But like a lot of people are also, shy or embarrassed to make mistakes. So first make your mistakes during these 30, 40 hours, and then that also trains you to be ready to make mistakes if you haven't learned a language. Like for me, I am excited to make mistakes. Like for me, it's like I will go out of my way to make a mistake because then I have learned. Maybe I don't really get embarrassed to make a mistake, but I'm just like, haha, and then I'll laugh and I'll keep it in my brain. So I said it incorrectly. And then I learned. That's what learning is. But yeah, obviously being extroverted helps. I'm guessing if you're learning a language, you want to speak to people. So yeah, use the language as a way to speak to people. Obviously, yeah, you don't want to bother people, but most people are happy to speak their language with you. I promise you, they would rather speak to you in their language than in English. Like most people, in my experience, speaking like 15 languages in other countries, people are going to be excited to speak to you in their language.
So that kind of inspires you to keep going because people are happy to talk to you.
Yeah, and you have a chance to exchange. It's an exchange, right? Like people see that I'm interested in their culture and them. It's a part of your identity, right? When they see you're interested in them, then they're going to be more receptive to you and they're open, right? So that's part of the reason language is so addicting, like to me, because I see, like for example, I'm here in Hungary. I know zero Hungarian, and like for me, it feels like there's a wall. Like I can't like.
Yeah, I saw you. You were like really uncomfortable going around. Not really uncomfortable. You just you wanted to know.
Yeah,
you wanted to know what these people were saying. You have this itch inside of you.
Yeah, exactly. Because for me, it's like. Yeah, I mean, it's not. It's kind of. I'm addicted, so it's not. It's an obsession, but so it's like, what am I doing here if I can't speak the language? That's how I feel. Obviously, it's okay to go to a place if you can't speak the language because no one's going to speak every language of the world. But that's just how I feel because I have this obsession. But that's what drives me. I'm like, obviously the language is inherently interesting, but when you get that connection, like nobody has been angry that I speak their language.
Yeah.
Like no, yeah, I've only had positivity directed at me.
What about people being negative about the way you're speaking their language, like making grammar mistakes or pronunciation mistakes? Have people ever been maybe condescending? Or...
Yeah, no one has ever. I mean, people are. Let's see. Maybe one time someone was like saying, but it was actually another foreigner. It was in France, and they were like, "Yeah, my French wasn't that good. I was just learning a language." But that was literally only one time. Like, "Oh, you're French. You need to speak better French." And I was like 22. I was like, "Well, I'm trying." But that was literally the only time that I've done spoken more than 15 languages, used 15 languages. I don't say I'll use them all fluently, but I've used them in different places.
Well, that actually was a question on how would you define fluency?
Okay, good segue then. So for me, fluency obviously comes from the word fluent, to flow. So if you can flow in the conversation, then I would say you are fluent. Good?
Yeah, keep going.
So flow, how do you flow? Basically, for me, when you can flow in a conversation whenever the person I'm speaking to uses their language and doesn't have to adjust their level to accommodate me. They don't have to gauge, is he going to understand what I say? Am I speaking too fast? Is this too high? Can I, if that person feels comfortable speaking how they would usually speak to another native speaker, and then I can respond in a way, I don't want people to think, this misconception is we have to respond like a native speaker, which is absurd. No, you'll never respond unless my English is really good, not because I'm a native English speaker, it's because I've had crazy amount of hours of input and output of English, right? It's not there's no such thing as native speaker, it's just massive amounts of input. So that's my goal. I'm not trying to speak like a native speaker, but I'm just trying to understand like a native speaker and then be able to grow from there. Yeah, grow as a speaker. Because every opportunity, if you're able to understand everything, then you can basically grow at all times. You're always learning. So that's like my goal, to understand. Maybe my speaking is my listening is at a B2, B2, B1 even. You can even have your listening as a B1. And then from there you can gradually grow, and speak about more complicated topics. Yeah.
So back to, you mentioned, you're at this stage with the tutor. You've done your 60 Assimil lessons. You're maybe at 180 hours, 200 hours into language study. And you're in a language where there's some challenging pronunciation features that you've never encountered. Long, short vowel distinction of Thai, or you mentioned the weird vowels of Vietnamese. How do you approach pronunciation?
Okay. So during those, first off, I'm always aware. I mean, I've studied. It's pretty rare for me to come across a phoneme that I can't hear, like if it's voiced, unvoiced, nasal. Obviously, tones. I've studied several tonal languages, but I still need to practice listening to those. So, just always being aware of those aspects, right? So whenever you're listening, I'm not gonna say I'm not gonna say that my pronunciation is perfect in any language, because I never strive for perfection in pronunciation. I don't, as long as I'm understood. I'm not saying don't pay attention to tone. Tones are important. Pronunciation is important, but I don't need to sound like a native speaker, right? I want to be able to convey my point, communicate my point. They can understand it, and then get information from them. So, pronunciation, for example, Vietnamese has crazy amount of vowels, right? I definitely don't pronounce them all right. However, that has not hindered my communication because I can get them pretty accurate, like with the vowels. So make sure you're always aware of pronunciation, of tones, of vowel length. So usually, if I'm doing if I'm doing the 40 hours of the teacher, I'm actually use my hands a lot. Even now I'm using my hands, right? So vowel length, I'll do long, short, to remind myself when I'm speaking, or if I'm just helping friends learn. Tones, I'll do rising, so moving your hands, this is Chinese tones. Four
so these
tones.
kinesthetic learning aids, mnemonic devices.
Yeah, so that's more for like reminding. I tell people do that because you need to remind yourself. If you're like king kao, like the falling tone king kao in Thai, which is a long falling, and I know it because I said it wrong before. I said king kao. You might say, how? Why can't I understand that? But I mean, it's a long tone. It's like the difference from bit and bat. Right? So for us, it's easy. For us, you might think, wow, it's the same vowel sound, but no, it sounds different. So, if I'm doing this, and I do it with my hand, I can't mess it up unless like my hand was wrong too, like the hand gesture. So it's making you slow down. This is for the 40 hours. Slow down, pay attention to it, and most language learning is just putting your 100% of your mind focus on that, on those aspects. Like if I'm listening, you saw me today, I look at the signs in Hungarian and I don't know any Hungarian. And that's for a language I know zero about. So you can imagine, like if I'm in a place where I know the language, I'm learning the language, then I'm going, paying so much attention to my surroundings and what the people say, the things on the signs, the way people say things. So it's more about awareness. Once you're aware, hyper aware, not to the point where it's uncomfortable, but like put your 100% of your attention on, okay, this is the pronunciation. Is that a long or short? What tone was that? Like asking yourself and then using it correctly. If you can do that, it might not be perfect like native speaker level, but it's going to be good enough. And then, for example, now, I can get my Thai pronunciation better. So, I definitely consider myself fluent in Thai, but I can still improve if I wanted to at this point. But I've spoken Thai like for 4 years, never used English in Thailand. So it's like I was already able to communicate. And now if I want to improve, I can do that. But I use my time to learn other languages, but it depends on what your goals are, So just pay attention, I would say. Pay attention to those things. And then make sure, like you're going to ask the teacher during those 40 hours, but like, please, hey, can you pay attention before the class? Say, okay, when you can use English before the class, just like the 2 minutes before, after. So please pay attention to short or long vowels. Can you use these hand gestures? It's long, short. Please use hand gestures if I'm messing up the tone. Or please repeat the word. So, I always say I ask the teachers to repeat it correctly. So they don't tell me where I was wrong. I ask them to repeat it. And then I have to see where I was wrong. And that's creating that hyper-awareness to see where you're wrong to autocorrect. Because if you can autocorrect, then you're your own teacher, right? So to be able to autocorrect is also part of that 40-hour training wheels.
So you have all these... You have this huge inventory of phonemes and grammatical concepts that you've learned from learning all these really diverse languages. If you were in the position of somebody learning a foreign language for the first time, how would you change your approach?
So the approach that I use, you mean?
If it was you. Right. If it was you, how might you change your approach if it was the first and you didn't have this huge background of foreign language knowledge?
So again, it depends on the language. So if I'm learning like a Romance or Germanic language
from an English
then definitely I'm going to say be aware of vocabulary. There's so much overlap in vocabulary. Use something like Wiktionary. Wiktionary, which is a website, tells you etymology, words. Use that to be able to tell you where a word comes from. For example, Vorsitzender in German means CEO, chairman, Vorsitzender. But then it's actually a calque from Latin, which is president, where we get our word president. So this was a calque. So calque, I'll explain. Comes from French calquer, and it just means to trace. So basically, it means a word that was. It's not like no, I don't want to say the word calque. Okay, so like rendezvous is from French rendezvous, which just means meeting. In English, we say the same exact word. We just stole that word, but. Borrow, whatever, steal, it can be steal. But a calque is different, like I just gave that example. For means in front of, just as pre means in front of in Latin. Side, sit, and as we see German, the German sit, sitzen, vorsitzen. Actually, in English we use, sit, right? So, president just means you preside over, right, a meeting. Mm-hmm. So you are sitting in front of the meeting. So this is a calque. Basically, if you're learning any German or...
So it's like different than a cognate in that they've kind of taken the pieces of the word and directly translated each piece to form this larger word.
So for in German, there's so many calques. I think German's pretty cool because it's pretty logical. It's kind of like Chinese in that sense where it has two parts and you put them together like break, fast. It's quite... logical in that sense. But so if it's not German, there's Germanic language. If it's a Romance language you're learning, still English is, if it's for English speakers, chock full of French or Romance vocabulary. So same thing. Like you can learn, like one common is like in Spanish is like in French, courir, French, and Spanish it means to run. In English, of course, we use run, Germanic rennen in German. Those are all similar. However, we have so many variations of the word correr or courir in French, in English. Like courier, the person who's like taking the mail, right? Like they would be running before. I guess that's the idea. But we also have the word like current, the water that's running. We also say the river's running, right? Or the water's running or flowing. Corridor. The area where you're running, like you're not running, but it's like going through. Yeah. So current. So these are all those words are you know all those words in English, and those are all from the same Latin words that you can say correr, courir, Italian correre. So pretty much use Wiktionary because you have. If you're an English speaker, you have this depth of knowledge. You just don't know it. You just need to find where you have to make those connections, and that's really good because you need to see. If you're able to make these connections, it's going to be faster. It's going to give you confidence. It's going to just make it more familiar, and so that's one advantage you have. And then another, so as the beginner, but I would say just basically follow the steps. Yeah, I would say do the translation method, but then be aware of the similarities.
And then, what about for a language where you don't share a lot of vocabulary and etymology?
So then
going to Thai or something.
So that's definitely gonna be if you're monolingual going into Thai. It's gonna take more time, but I don't want to say it's more difficult because actually there's less conjugations. I would say first forget like we were talking earlier today because we like languages. Don't think in terms of English. Of course, at first you will have to. Most like Asian languages, they think of time in a different manner. So don't think of like, I need to say past tense. So I would say first, disassociate your mind from this only one way of thinking because that really will restrict you. Don't try to translate words like words to words. If people know, I think in a lot of Asian language we ask if you ate food, right? Kin khao riyang, kin khao riyang. So have you eaten yet? That just means, how you're doing. Pai nai ma, where have you gone? Or where have you been? We don't translate that. It's like, how have you been? Literally.
Pai nai ma would be like, go where come.
Yeah.
It's like if you try to translate that directly, it's like, well, what does that mean? But then you have to think about the meaning, the pragmatic meaning.
Yes, exactly.
How's it going?
So I would say if it's a language that's quite this like different, then focus on meaning. Don't focus on translation. And of course, how can you start translating if you don't? Yeah, you I mean, how can you start getting meaning if you don't know the basic words? Yeah, at first you have to translate. I mean, that's obvious. But in the Assimil method, like I said, they provide the word, the meaning, and then the word-to-word translation. But just remember, just be aware that you can't translate. It's a language that's so divergent. And just I think it's more of just free your mind. Like, if you're thinking like there's, for example, one common in Thai is people will like to say, how long have you been here? How long, we use the present perfect. How long have you been here, right? We use present perfect. But Thai, there's no present perfect. And also they have a completely different way to ask that. Or like how long have you studied Thai? So, kun rianภาษา Thai นานหรือยัง kun rian ภาษา Thai นานหรือยัง So it just means you study Thai long, or not yet long, or not yet. You study Thai long or not yet. So this phrase, or not yet, is very common in Thai. And it replaces a lot of the normal, like not normal, but the ways we'd ask a question in English. So if you're acutely aware of it, you hear this riyang, and you're paying attention. Oh, okay. They're using it for this, like nan riyang. That's so common. People will ask you in Thailand. So listen to how people are asking you. Don't try to say riyan pasar hai nan tarai, which is how we would want to translate.
Long, literally how long. Yeah.
So be aware of that. Like, nobody says that. So don't try to translate your way. Try to pay attention to what you hear.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's more of a mindset, right? Be free, Of course, at first you're going to have to say, riyan pasar hai ma nan tarai. Okay, say it wrong. But then when you hear another person will inevitably ask you, because that's what they always ask you, right? Then like, they didn't say tarai. Tarai, I've been noticing is used tarai is used more for price, which it's used for like how much, right? Yeah. It's more used for how much, yeah. Sorry, I had that. It's tarai. I was not saying pronounce.
It's really hard to be speaking English and then drop in Thai words with the correct tone.
Yeah.
Because we have this English sentence level prosody that we want to maintain, and the Thai tone doesn't fit.
Yeah, that's why it's better to do the whole sentence. Yeah, that's right.
What are the worst things you see from when people fail to learn languages, and why? What are the bad habits or the bad methods people have?
So honestly, number one is just consistency, dedication. Like if you are dedicated and consistent, you will inevitably do it. It's gonna happen, but it might take more time. But like for me, like I told you, I've spent over 25,000 hours with languages in my life since I've been 19. Those, maybe the first 5,000 hours I didn't use, maybe say 3,000. Could have used better. I could have used one more wisely. It wasn't until I got to 6,000, 7,000 where I was just probably, now I got this. It's a well-oiled machine, right? Finely tuned machine, that's what they say. So I wouldn't have gotten there, if I didn't have the previous 6,000 or 3,000 hours where I don't want to be effective if I wasn't seeing what didn't work. You wouldn't get there, right? So, maybe go online, see the things, different methods. But if you're not putting in, for me, I think 2 20-minute sessions, minimum per day is important. If you can do 1 30-minute, that's better. But honestly, it's we don't have attention spans anymore in our society, right? Who can focus for 30 minutes while looking at their phone? So I'd say, put it on airplane mode. That's why I like to use a book. I don't like to use apps. I use a book. So I put my phone on airplane mode. I do listen to music, but that helps me focus. As long as it's 100% focus, And do that. Either I said 20 minutes is not that good because it probably takes 3 or 4 minutes to get into that state. So do 2 times 25 and think of 5 minutes where you can be distracted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you do that, you're gonna get it. It's inevitable, but it's about, yeah, that's essentially it.
Consistency.
Yeah, it's consistency, and then from there you can see like the other tips I mentioned before, the 40 hours. You don't try to translate one word at one word. That's essentially a waste. Yeah, you're wasting your time because your mind is not. You don't learn like that. You don't learn like a piecemeal. We learn through context.
Mm-hmm.
I try to as much as possible try to mimic how I learned as a kid, and of course I'm using my adult analytical knowledge to help expedite the process. And yeah, and then I just go out like during those 40 hours, just act like a kid. And then after that, yeah, maybe I get like, now I'm a teenager, now I'm a young adult. Now, I can speak like an adult finally. But don't be discouraged because you're not going to go from newborn to adult speaking. That's absurd. We didn't do that in your own language. You didn't do it in your own language. Why would you do it in a foreign language? So that's why I say it's consistency.
Do you think you're a different person in different languages you speak? Do you have a different personality?
No, I don't believe that. But language is obviously, no one would debate that it's quite intertwined with culture, right? So, in different languages will value different things because those cultures will value those things. So, I always say, like in Thai, when I speak Thai, I'm not inherently kinder, but because I would pay more attention to people around me, because that's what the language dictates with words, like แกร่งใจ ไม่มีมารยาท พูดเบาๆ ไม่ต้องเสียงดัง like there's a lot of these vocabulary words, like there's words that you'll hear, or like, yeah, นำใจ you ใจเย็น those are like very common words like you hear day to day. So like when I speak Thai, I'm just more aware because it's culturally, and I feel like that's why I'm a Farang who don't speak Thai, don't know that, so they might be more obnoxious in that culture.
Yeah.
And so that's why for me it's so important to learn a language. Because if you don't, Thai people are lovely anyways, they're going to be nice to you, but like, I feel like we should reciprocate that. You should respect their culture too. And you of course, I'm not saying if you don't speak Thai, you can't respect their culture, but it's going to be harder to, because you don't know what they value as deeply if you don't speak their language. So even though you might be well-intentioned, I still feel like it's not going to be as you can't appreciate them as much as you would be able to if you were to speak their language. So kind of that diverged from your question, but each language, yeah, if by speaking that language, I understand what those people value, and if I'm talking to those people who speak the language, then yeah, my personality doesn't change, but what I pay attention to changes. So, like I said, in Thai or in Chinese, I'm more aware of like the other person's feelings, I would say.
Chinese too?
In Chinese, I would say I'm more yeah, also. I'm a lot more modest in Chinese.
Or modest.
Yeah, because that's what they value.
Mm-hmm.
Like you wouldn't really say thank you to a compliment. You would be very modest, or you would return a compliment instead. In English, you would say, "Hey, go up, your Chinese is great." I'd say, "Oh, thank you, man, appreciate it."
Mm-hmm.
In Chinese, you would either deflect the compliment or give a compliment back, right? So yeah, it's
interesting. What other languages are there different modes of acting and being? Can you give other examples of other languages?
For example, in Spanish, it's a lot more. They use a lot more less I. So you might, for example, for the glass. So you wouldn't say I dropped the glass. You would say the glass se me cayó el vaso. So you would say the glass fell from me. So se me cayó. Me here is the indirect object. So you are the indirect object. it occurred to me. Se cayó el vaso as it fell. So it fell to me, not like literally fell to me, but I was in the act of handling it, and this action occurred to me. So if you think about this, wow, that doesn't mean that much. But yeah, you're basically, if I said that to you, then if I said, hey man, I dropped the glass, your first instinct like, oh, what, you dropped it. But if I say se me cayó, it inherently feels less like it was my fault. Like, because even the se makes it impersonal.
It's like it's more passive.
Yes, exactly. Spanish is a lot. They use this passive construction is a lot more common, and so because of this, I feel that then they would be less likely to blame you. I mean, you can take it either way, but it's like you can never say I dropped the glass using I as the noun. I as the subject. You would say it. You would say it if you intentionally dropped it.
Right.
But for an accident, which is kind of cool.
There's this distinction.
Yeah. So that's kind of cool, right? So if it's something an accident, in English you'd be like, oh, but it was an accident. But in Spanish that would be redundant. You said se me cayó. Like, of course. Why would I drop it in an accident? Why did I drop it on purpose? Se me cayó. I didn't do it. It wasn't my fault. The glass. It was inevitably going to fall.
Yeah.
And like I was just there to witness it. So yeah, so that's one thing, which I think is okay. I appreciate that. Like glass falls, like why should you get angry at me? You know, like
yeah.
I think it maintains like this harmonious relationship, right? You shouldn't. I mean, it's an accident, right? If it's something you have control over, it's fine. But yeah. Any other? Let's see. I mean, Thai is the big one because I speak that the most.
What are these other Asian languages? Khmer, Korean, Vietnamese, Japanese.
Korean, yeah. So Korean definitely also is more. You're paying attention to things like there's a word like nunchi. Nunchi is like being aware of how people are looking at you. Nun means like eye. And then chi, I don't know exactly what that means. Does it mean, someone correct me, is it like the spirit, feeling? But basically it's like the feeling. If I say, like, you feel a nunchi means nunchi. You feel people looking at you because you've done something that's like socially not acceptable. So you don't
like
want
the heat of shame.
Kind of like that. Yeah. So you're just, but it's very common in their culture. Like,
right.
So,
yeah. Like we can understand that conceptually in English, but it's not like a word we'd use every day.
Yeah, whereas they use it every day,
Yeah.
so you're going to be a lot more paying attention. In Japanese, it's mendokasai. Sorry, not mendokasai, meiwaka.
Okay.
So a meiwaka, like, you'll see that in signs everywhere, and it's like, don't be meiwaka as like an annoyance or hindrance. So meiwaka in Japanese will be like, you'll see it on signs because you don't want to bring this meiwaka to others. So kind of like renjai in Thai. So it's like,
which in Grengjai is it's a hard one to translate because you can translate it as considerate or being considerate, but then in English we wouldn't say like, no, I don't want to do that because I feel considerate.
No,
but that is a normal thing in Thai to be like, no, I'm too Grengjai to do that.
Yeah. So the first time I used the word Grengjai, I was like, yes. Like when I felt it, I used it because I felt it.
Yeah.
So I was like, no, I don't want to do that because I'm Grengjai. Like,
and it's a real human feeling, and we feel that too.
Yeah.
Westerners, Americans feel Grengjai, but we don't have a single word that encapsulates this kind of cloud of feeling that the Grengjai does.
But because there exists a word, you're going to be more likely to recall, to want to prevent that feeling because it's going to be like, and it's not so intense. Like, it's more, like you said, considerate. Like I want this person to feel comfortable around me. So I'm gonna be Grengjai because I want them to be happy, and they want me to be happy too. Like it's about maintaining the relationship. Every language has these. Like it's when you learn any language, you'll see what that language values like by learning it. So definitely it doesn't change your personality, but even with tastes.
Yeah.
Like there's many different tastes. Like in kimchi in Korean, there's a taste. I can't remember the verb, but It literally translates as to taste like sesame or taste like sesame oil. So this verb just means that.
It's a verb.
Yeah. So you would say, oh, this dish tastes like sesame oil, and it's just one word, one verb.
It's not an adjective. It's not like this dish is salty, this dish is sweet, this dish is sesame flavor.
Well, their verbs can be considered adjectives, I guess, but no, it's just it's an infinitive. It has an infinitive form. So
to taste like sesame.
Yeah, you can look that up after your interview. So that because that word exists in Korean, you're gonna obviously be paying attention to sesame flavor, right?
Right, and it's a big deal in Korean food.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice thing about Korean food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then you can use it in any food because you have that word. So then that's gonna make you more attuned to this flavor of sesame, and it's not like in this situation it's neutral. It's not about social harmony, but it's just to show you that language is not controlled the way you think, but language is basically the guide to what you perceive around you. There is a billion things we can perceive in our surroundings, like that we have the choice to perceive. But we have, obviously we're usually in our own heads, but if we have so many choices of what we want to focus on in that moment, it's what language what really drives us to choose what we're going to place our focus on.
But that makes me think, has learning all these other languages made you a different English speaker?
That's I've never been asked that. I would say in the sense, different English speaker. I've always loved languages, so even in English, I just look up really obscure words, esoteric words like that. I was trying to, that word between sleep and awake.
Right, we were trying to think of that earlier.
I'm going to get it after the interview, but sorry, I thought I had it. But no, I've always loved language. I love words. I'm obsessed with words. So with English, I don't think I pay attention to English. Even though it's my best language, like I pay attention to it, and like I would pay attention to any other language. I appreciate the dexterity I have with it. Like, it's really cool to be. To not have to think, and just speak it. But I feel like I do that with some languages, but like the dexterity I have with English obviously is unparalleled because of that. Like I said, just the input. I don't feel like it's because it's my native language. It's just input of But I think it doesn't matter. You can be you can be more eloquent than someone as a native speaker. Even if you're just learning, if you're fourth, fifth, sixth language, that just comes from what the vocabulary you choose to use. What type of register you're using. It doesn't. I don't really. This native. I definitely didn't answer your question. But this native speaker thing is not so important. But so you said about English. I don't think it changed my English. No. Yeah, I always
because you've always had this like appreciation for languages and curious about words, and so and you still have that.
Yeah. I still love. Like I said, I love English. I love every language, but I don't love English because it's English. I just because it's it's just any language. It's like I don't take any other one, and it has a lot of cool words. It's easier for me because of the hours I got. Hours I have been exposed to it, but
all right, well, thanks for sitting down with me, even though you just flew in from Shanghai, jet lag, but I think you shared a lot of really interesting insight that the world will be happy to hear.
Well, I hope people, maybe one or two people at least watch.
Hope we get a couple likes and comments on it.
But
thanks a lot.
I did, no problem. I appreciate the questions.
Well, we're looking forward to round 2 then, sometime.
All right. Thank you, sir. สวัสดีครับทุกคน